Knowing your rights is one of the most powerful tools you can carry through life, yet so many people ignore it until a problem arises. The truth is that rights are not just abstract legal concepts. They are shields that protect your choices, your property, and your dignity. When someone challenges you, whether it is a neighbor, an authority figure, or even an institution, your knowledge can be the difference between being bullied into submission or standing firm with confidence. Without this awareness, it is easy for others to take advantage of fear or uncertainty. People who understand their rights naturally stand taller and speak with more assurance because they know where they stand. In the story of the ranch lake, the so-called HOA Karen tried to use intimidation as a weapon. By calling the police, she counted on fear to sway the outcome in her favor. For many people, the sudden presence of law enforcement would cause panic, second-guessing, and maybe even retreat. But when you know the law is on your side, the intimidation loses its power. Instead of folding under pressure, you can calmly assert your position, showing that you are not easily shaken. This clarity shifts the balance of power and often leaves aggressors frustrated. Understanding your rights also creates freedom to make bold decisions without constantly seeking approval. Imagine living every day unsure of what you are allowed to do with your own property or your own life. That insecurity limits opportunities and builds unnecessary fear of judgment. On the other hand, knowledge gives you the freedom to act confidently and plan strategically. You stop waiting for permission from people who have no authority over you. This independence becomes a form of self-defense that discourages interference. Those who lack understanding often give away power without realizing it. They comply with demands that have no basis in law simply because they assume someone else must be correct. That blind compliance feeds the cycle of control for people who thrive on manipulation. In every community, there are those who rely on fear and ignorance to maintain influence over others. Breaking that cycle begins with education, curiosity, and the courage to ask questions. Once you recognize your rights, you stop handing over control so easily. The importance of knowing your rights extends beyond property disputes or neighborhood conflicts. It applies to your workplace, your education, your finances, and even your daily interactions. Employers may try to impose unreasonable demands, but an informed employee can stand their ground. Companies may bury unfair policies in contracts, but an aware customer can call them out. Even in personal relationships, the principle remains the same. No one can undermine your boundaries when you clearly understand where they begin and end. Knowledge strengthens your voice across every area of life. Confidence built on knowledge is different from arrogance because it is not based on guesswork. It is grounded in facts, rules, and legal protections that give you legitimacy. Arrogance can collapse when challenged, but true confidence grows stronger under pressure. When someone tests you, you can respond with calm assurance rather than defensive anger. That calmness unsettles people who rely on intimidation because it proves their tactics are ineffective. In turn, they realize that pushing further will only backfire. In conflicts, many people fear the complexity of the law or the formality of official processes. But in reality, most rights are straightforward once you take the time to learn them. They are not reserved for lawyers or experts. They belong to every citizen equally. The effort you put into understanding them pays back tenfold in peace of mind and personal strength. Even small steps, like reading contracts carefully or researching local property rules, can prevent major problems later. It is not about memorizing every regulation, but about knowing enough to recognize when someone tries to cross the line. The lesson is clear: intimidation only works when there is ignorance. By knowing your rights, you strip bullies of their favorite weapon. The law, the rules, and the protections that exist are not just words on paper. They are the foundation of your ability to live freely and securely. When someone like Karen calls the cops, their intention is to shake your confidence and paint you as powerless. But the person who stands there calm, informed, and unwavering reminds everyone that knowledge cannot be silenced. It is a silent armor, invisible yet undeniable, and it ensures that you walk through life protected against manipulation. When someone tries to intimidate you, their greatest hope is that you will shrink under pressure and hand over your power. Intimidation works best when it creates fear, hesitation, or doubt in your mind, because those emotions cloud judgment. People who rely on intimidation rarely have true authority. They use aggression and fear tactics as substitutes for real control. The moment you refuse to be intimidated, their strategy begins to collapse. Your calmness and courage expose their weakness and force them to rethink their approach. Fear often comes from the unknown, and intimidation feeds on that uncertainty. When you don't know what the outcome might be, you imagine the worst, and that imagined scenario can paralyze you. This is why people call the police, threaten lawsuits, or raise their voices. They want you to assume they have more power than they actually do. If you give in to that fear, you hand them control over your actions. But when you see intimidation for what it is, just smoke and mirrors, you stop letting it dictate your choices. The presence of authority figures is one of the most common intimidation tactics. In the ranch story, calling the cops was meant to frighten and embarrass, creating the illusion of wrongdoing. But the police do not exist to enforce personal grudges or imagined rules. They exist to uphold real laws. If you stand calmly and present facts, the situation often diffuses itself. Law enforcement or authority figures quickly recognize who is acting with reason and who is acting out of spite. This clarity undermines the intimidator's plan entirely. Confidence is your best defense against intimidation because it shows you are not easily manipulated. A person who remains calm while others shout accuse or threaten sends a powerful message. That message says, "I know my position, and I will not be shaken." It disarms aggressors because anger loses its force when it does not provoke the intended reaction. Instead of fueling the conflict, your composure highlights their immaturity and lack of real power. The one who refuses to be rattled always holds the upper ground. Intimidation often relies on the element of surprise. Aggressors hope to catch you off guard. Forcing a quick reaction before you can think clearly, they push demand or create urgency so that you feel cornered. But the key is slowing down the moment, refusing to react impulsively, and reclaiming control over your response. When you pause, breathe, and choose calmness, you break their rhythm, the intimidation loses momentum, and suddenly you are the one setting the pace. It is important to remember that intimidation thrives on perception, not truth. The louder someone yells, the more they hope you'll mistake volume for authority. The more they posture, the more they hope you'll see strength where there is only insecurity. If you see through the act, it becomes easier to stand your ground. By recognizing that intimidation is a performance, you stop being its audience. Instead, you focus on reality, facts, and fairness, leaving their dramatics ineffective. There will always be people who misuse their influence or status to pressure others. Sometimes it's a neighbor who thinks they control the entire community. Other times it's a boss who bullies employees into silence. These individuals thrive when others submit out of fear. But the moment someone resists, the false sense of authority begins to crumble. Refusing to be intimidated is not about being confrontational, it is about refusing to give power to people who never had it in the first place. When you practice courage in the face of intimidation, it creates a ripple effect. Others who may have felt powerless see your example and find strength to resist as well. This collective refusal weakens the culture of fear that aggressors depend on. Communities grow stronger when individuals show that intimidation is not the end of the story. The more people who stand firm, the less effective intimidation becomes for everyone. In time, what once felt like a threat becomes nothing more than background noise. Intimidation is a weapon people use when they lack real authority, but its strength lies in your willingness to believe it. When someone raises their voice, calls the police, or tries to corner you, they are betting that you will fold under pressure. They want you to mistake aggression for power and silence for compliance. But once you understand that intimidation is more performance than reality, its grip on you weakens. Standing tall in those moments signals that you will not surrender your voice. Fear thrives in uncertainty, and intimidation exploits that vulnerability. When you are unsure of the outcome, your mind fills the space with worst-case scenarios, and that imagined future can freeze your actions. People who intimidate count on this pause, hoping your hesitation will give them the upper hand. But clarity is the antidote. Knowing where you stand allows you to resist fear's weight. Once fear loses its foundation, intimidation has no ground to stand on. The act of calling in authority is one of the most common intimidation tactics designed to rattle confidence and create doubt. Seeing the police at your door or an official letter in your hand can feel overwhelming in the moment. Yet authority is not automatically on the side of whoever shouts the loudest or acts the boldest. Facts, law, and reason carry far more weight than emotional displays. By responding with calm logic, you reveal the emptiness of their attempt to frighten you. Remaining calm under intimidation is a demonstration of true strength. Anger or panic feeds the aggressor's energy, but composure drains it. When you meet aggression with steadiness, you strip away the reaction they crave. Your stillness becomes louder than their shouting, exposing their behavior as childish rather than powerful. The ability to hold steady in tense moments marks the difference between being controlled and being in control. Many intimidation tactics depend on creating urgency, pressuring you into decisions before you can think clearly. Aggressors thrive when you act on impulse, making mistakes that benefit them. The most effective response is to slow down the moment, reclaim your pace, and refuse to be rushed. A pause gives you back your clarity and denies them control of the rhythm. In that pause, their advantage slips away. Perception is the stage where intimidation performs, hoping to look bigger than it truly is. Loudness, threats, or exaggerated claims are designed to trick you into seeing power that does not exist. But when you separate perception from reality, you stop feeding the illusion. The aggressor can only hold their mask as long as you play along. Once you refuse to accept the act, intimidation turns into noise without substance. There will always be people who lean on intimidation because they lack genuine influence. They may be neighbors, coworkers, or even leaders, but the pattern is the same. They use fear to fill the gaps where respect should be. The key is remembering that fear is a choice, and choosing courage changes the entire equation. When you do not bow, their assumed control evaporates. You remind them and yourself that respect is earned, not demanded. Courage in the face of intimidation is contagious. When one person refuses to be silenced, others notice and feel empowered to do the same. This collective strength breaks down cultures of fear, replacing them with resilience and unity. Aggressors depend on isolation, but they lose power when people stand together. Every act of resistance chips away at the effectiveness of intimidation. In time, what once seemed like a threat becomes nothing more than an empty gesture. When confronted with conflict, the natural impulse for many people is to react emotionally. Anger rises, voices escalate, and decisions are made in the heat of the moment without careful thought. This kind of reaction may feel powerful, but it often hands control to the other person. Aggressors feed on emotional responses because it shows they have successfully provoked you. The wiser path is to respond with strategy, keeping emotions in check while focusing on long-term outcomes. Strategy is rooted in clarity, and clarity comes from stepping back before you act. When someone tries to provoke you, they expect you to argue or lash out impulsively. But choosing patience allows you to analyze the situation, identify your options, and select the one that benefits you most. Emotional reactions may win the moment, but strategic responses win the future. The difference lies in asking not, "How do I feel right now?" but "What outcome do I want to achieve?" Responding with strategy also protects your credibility. Once you lose control, others may view you as irrational, no matter how justified your anger might be. This weakens your position and strengthens the one who set the trap. A calm, well-thought-out response, however, communicates maturity and intelligence. People respect those who can keep their composure while still standing firm in their decisions. Respect builds influence, and influence is a far greater weapon than rage. Strategic responses also shift power dynamics in your favor. When the other side expects a heated reaction but encounters calm reasoning, their plan collapses. They are forced to confront logic instead of chaos, and most aggressors are unprepared for that. Strategy is not about being passive, it is about being deliberate. By controlling your reaction, you quietly take back control of the situation itself. That control becomes your advantage. Many conflicts escalate simply because both sides let emotions dictate the pace. One person yells, the other yells louder, and suddenly the disagreement becomes a war. A strategic mind does not allow itself to be dragged into that spiral. Instead, it remains focused on goals, solutions, and the bigger picture. By refusing to play the emotional game, you stay one step ahead. Distance from the heat of the moment becomes your shield. Strategy also means knowing when to act and when to wait. Sometimes the strongest move is not immediate confrontation but silence, gathering information, or planning behind the scenes. Impulsive actions close doors, while strategic patience keeps doors open. The aggressor often expects quick resistance, but when it doesn't come, they are left unbalanced. In that pause, you gain room to design a response that not only protects you but also strengthens your position. Choosing strategy over rage does not mean suppressing your feelings. It means directing them wisely. Anger can fuel determination, but left unchecked, it clouds judgment. When you channel emotions into focused action, they become energy rather than obstacles. This discipline transforms frustration into productivity and turns defensiveness into power. You become less reactive and more proactive, shaping outcomes instead of being swept away by them. People who master strategic responses also inspire trust in others. Neighbors, colleagues, and even adversaries recognize the difference between hot-headed reactions and thoughtful decision-making. When people trust your ability to handle pressure, they are more likely to support you. Even those who oppose you will think twice before challenging you again. Strategy builds a reputation of resilience, showing that you are not easily shaken, and reputations carry influence far beyond one conflict. Ultimately, responding with strategy instead of rage creates victories that last. Rage may win a battle, but it often burns bridges and leaves scars that linger. Strategy, on the other hand, not only resolves the conflict but also strengthens your position for the future. It creates outcomes you can live with, not regrets you wish to undo. The power of strategy is its ability to turn conflict into opportunity, while rage only turns opportunity into chaos. Turning the tables is about shifting from being the target of someone else's control to taking back your own power. Too often, people accept unfair treatment because they feel cornered and believe they have no options. Yet, there is always a way to use creativity, patience, and persistence to change the dynamics. When someone tries to box you in, the best response is not to accept their boundaries, but to redefine the entire playing field. That transformation changes you from being reactive to becoming proactive. When you turn the tables, you stop playing by the rules set by the aggressor. They expect you to defend yourself within the narrow limits they impose. Instead, you create a new path, one that exposes their weakness and amplifies your strength. This shift surprises them because it breaks their expectations. Suddenly, the power they believed was secure slips out of their hands and rests in yours. In the story of the ranch, buying the lot that blocked the aggressor's access was the ultimate example of turning the tables. Instead of fighting over small disputes or wasting time in arguments, a single decisive action changed the situation permanently. What began as an attempt to intimidate became an opportunity to demonstrate authority. The aggressor who tried to take control found themselves trapped by their own tactics. The tables were not just turned, they were overturned completely. The ability to reverse roles in conflict requires both courage and strategy. Courage is necessary because taking bold actions always involves risk. Strategy is essential because it ensures that the move you make is not just emotional but effective. Together, these qualities allow you to transform moments of weakness into opportunities for strength. Turning the tables does not happen by accident. It happens through careful thought combined with decisive action. Aggressors are often blindsided when someone they underestimate takes the upper hand. They thrive on the belief that others will stay passive or fearful. But when you act with clarity and strength, you shatter that illusion. Their confidence collapses because the script no longer follows their design. In that moment, they realize control is no longer theirs to enjoy. Turning the tables also serves as a reminder that control is never absolute. Even when someone seems to hold all the advantages, there are always vulnerabilities to uncover. The aggressor's confidence blinds them to their own weak spots. By paying attention, you can find those gaps and use them to your benefit. What seems like an impossible situation often holds the seeds of reversal. All it takes is the courage to look for them. The act of turning the tables also shifts the psychological balance. When someone realizes their intimidation no longer works, they lose not just power but also influence. Others watching the conflict begin to see the aggressor differently, as someone vulnerable rather than dominant. That shift ripples outward, changing the way the entire community perceives the dynamic. It is no longer a story of dominance, but a story of resistance and empowerment. In every conflict, there is a chance to choose whether to be a victim or a strategist. Turning the tables is the choice to be a strategist, to find leverage where none seems to exist. It means refusing to accept the narrative written by others and instead writing your own. The aggressor may set the opening move, but they do not dictate the ending. By flipping the script, you remind everyone that true power lies in resilience and ingenuity. Boundaries are the invisible lines that protect your peace, your property, and your dignity. They define where your rights begin and where another person's control ends. Without boundaries, people feel free to overstep, believing they can dictate your choices or invade your space. Many conflicts in life start when someone ignores or disrespects those lines. By setting and defending them, you create balance and clarity in every relationship or interaction. When someone tramples on your boundaries, it is rarely by accident. More often, it is a deliberate act to test how much control they can gain. If you allow one intrusion, they see it as permission to continue pushing further. That is why the first defense of boundaries is often the most important. Standing firm early shows that your space and your rights are not negotiable. Respect begins when others see that you demand it. Boundaries also serve as a form of self-respect. When you allow others to repeatedly cross lines, it sends a message that your needs do not matter. Over time, this erodes confidence and makes you feel powerless. By contrast, defending your boundaries reinforces the belief that you are worthy of fairness and consideration. It is not just about stopping others, it is about affirming your own value. Protecting your limits is protecting your sense of self. In the story of the ranch, the aggressor's interference was not just about property, it was about boundaries. Calling the police over a legal action was an attempt to erase the owner's right to decide what happened on his land. By refusing to bend, and later taking decisive action, those boundaries were restored and reinforced. It was a message that rights cannot be dictated by the loudest voice. The boundary became stronger because it was defended with action, not just words. Boundaries are not only physical but also emotional and psychological. A neighbor may invade your property, but a colleague might invade your time, or a friend may invade your patience. Each intrusion chips away at your well-being if left unaddressed. Clear boundaries protect you from being drained or controlled in subtle ways. They allow you to interact with others on equal terms rather than under constant pressure. People often fear that setting boundaries will make them seem unfriendly or difficult. In reality, healthy boundaries create healthier relationships. When both sides know the limits, there is less room for conflict or misunderstanding. Boundaries provide structure, showing where cooperation ends and independence begins. Far from creating distance, they build mutual respect. The people who truly value you will never resent your boundaries. Defending boundaries also teaches others how to treat you. Every time you stand firm, you communicate your standards. Those who are unwilling to honor those standards often remove themselves from your life, which is a blessing in disguise. What remains are relationships built on respect, not manipulation. Boundaries act as a filter, separating those who drain your energy from those who value it. In this way, they protect not just your space but your future. In conflicts, boundaries are often the first thing challenged because aggressors know they are the foundation of your control. If they can blur your lines, they can manipulate the entire situation. This is why protecting them is not optional but necessary. Once you establish your boundaries and enforce them, people learn that crossing them comes with consequences. That understanding alone is often enough to deter further attempts at control. Living with clear boundaries is ultimately about freedom. It frees you from constant interference, second-guessing, and resentment. It gives you room to focus on your goals instead of managing unnecessary conflict. Boundaries do not make you rigid, they make you secure. They create a world where respect is the standard, not the exception. And in that world, you stand stronger, knowing your space, your rights, and your dignity are protected. Respect is the foundation of any relationship, whether it is between neighbors, coworkers, or even strangers passing by. When respect is mutual, interactions flow smoothly because each side recognizes the value of the other. Conflict often arises when one person believes they are entitled to more authority or control than they deserve. This imbalance quickly erodes trust and creates tension. Mutual respect ensures that power is balanced and boundaries are honored. Those who misuse authority often mistake fear for respect. They believe that by intimidating others, when they earn compliance, when in reality they only create resentment. True respect is never forced, it is given freely when someone demonstrates fairness, honesty, and integrity. People may obey out of fear, but they will never admire or trust those who abuse power. Lasting respect grows from character, not coercion. In many communities, there are individuals who try to control others without any real right to do so. They act as self-appointed rulers, enforcing rules that suit them while ignoring fairness. These people are often loud, aggressive, or manipulative, believing their behavior commands respect. But their authority is fragile because it rests on arrogance rather than legitimacy. The moment they are challenged, their influence begins to crumble. Mutual respect means treating others as equals regardless of status, wealth, or personality. It requires humility to recognize that everyone has a right to their space, choices, and dignity. When one person tries to dominate, they violate this principle, creating unnecessary conflict. On the other hand, respecting others often encourages them to return that same courtesy. Respect becomes a cycle, growing stronger when both sides contribute to it. In the story of the ranch, the neighbor calling the police was an attempt to force control where it was not deserved. Instead of showing respect for another's property rights, she tried to impose her will through intimidation. The result was not respect but a backlash that removed her privileges. This demonstrates how misuse of authority often backfires, turning influence into isolation. Respect is not built through force but through fairness. People who live without mutual respect often find themselves in constant battles. They may win temporary victories through fear or manipulation, but they lose trust in the long run. No one willingly cooperates with someone who disrespects them, and eventually, resistance grows stronger. By contrast, those who show consistent respect build alliances that last. Their strength comes not from threats but from trust and goodwill. Mutual respect also creates peace of mind. When you know others will honor your boundaries and you will honor theirs, there is less anxiety and less conflict. It allows everyone to focus on growth and harmony instead of defending themselves. Disrespect breeds tension, but respect creates stability. That stability benefits not just individuals but entire communities. Respect is a two-way street and it requires accountability. You cannot demand respect while giving none in return. Leaders, neighbors, and peers alike must recognize that relationships thrive on fairness. When one side constantly takes while the other constantly gives, resentment festers. Mutual respect closes that gap, ensuring both sides stand on equal ground. When respect is mutual, conflicts are easier to resolve because both sides listen and compromise. Without respect, even small issues escalate into large disputes fueled by pride and stubbornness. Listening, acknowledging differences, and honoring boundaries are the building blocks of resolution. They prevent battles before they begin. Respect saves energy that would otherwise be wasted on unnecessary fights. Ultimately, respect is not about authority, rules, or power. It is about human dignity. Every person wants to feel valued, heard, and acknowledged. When that is denied, conflict is inevitable. But when people approach each other with fairness and consideration, even disagreements can be managed peacefully. Respect creates a foundation where strength does not come from dominance but from cooperation. Actions carry a weight that words alone often cannot achieve. You can argue endlessly, trying to explain your position or defend your choices, but people remember what you do more than what you say. Words can be twisted, ignored, or dismissed, but action leaves a permanent mark. Taking decisive steps shows that you are serious, that your boundaries are not suggestions but realities. Action transforms intention into undeniable proof. When someone challenges your authority or disrespects your space, responding with action sends the strongest message. Arguments may only fuel further conflict, while action closes the debate entirely. By making a move that cannot be undone, you demonstrate resolve without needing to shout. This kind of clarity forces others to recognize your strength. Even those who disagree are left with no choice but to respect it. Actions also protect your energy by avoiding endless cycles of conflict. Constantly arguing drains your focus and pulls you into the emotional game aggressors want you to play. But one clear action can end the cycle altogether. Instead of repeating yourself, you show your decision in a way that cannot be denied. That act saves you from wasting time and proves your strength more efficiently. In the ranch story, buying the lot that blocked access to the lake was more powerful than 1,000 arguments. It ended the neighbor's ability to interfere and flipped the power dynamic completely. The act itself became the statement, louder than any explanation could have been. People may argue with your words, but they cannot argue with a deed that changes reality. Action writes the final chapter of the conflict. The effectiveness of action lies in its permanence. Words may fade from memory, but action creates tangible consequences that cannot be ignored. When people realize their behavior has real costs, they think twice before repeating it. This shifts the balance of power in your favor, not because you shouted the loudest, but because you acted the smartest. Consequences teach lessons that conversations often fail to deliver. Taking action also builds credibility. Others may question your resolve until they see you follow through. Once you act decisively, they understand that your boundaries are not empty threats. This consistency makes people less likely to test you in the future. They know that disrespect will always be met with results, not just complaints. Credibility is built when words and actions align. Action also inspires respect because it reflects courage. Many people hesitate to act out of fear of consequences, choosing instead to talk endlessly about what they wish they could do. but those who take bold steps prove that they value their principles enough to defend them. This bravery is noticed, even by adversaries. People respect what is demonstrated far more than what is declared. Words can sometimes inflame conflict, while actions can resolve it with finality. An aggressor may argue against your claims forever, but they cannot argue against a reality you create. By making moves that alter the situation, you shift from defense to offense. You stop being the person reacting to their behavior and become the one defining the outcome. That shift is where real power lies. Living by the principle that action speaks louder than words changes how people view you. They learn that your voice is not just noise but a promise of follow-through. This reputation makes others think twice before crossing your boundaries. It also gives you confidence, knowing that you do not rely solely on arguments to prove your point. Your strength is visible, undeniable, and enduring.